everyone. Welcome back to our Street Smart Ventures podcast. I'm Michael Scanlon, your host as always, and I am super pumped to be here with Sean Spence, an advocate in Pennsylvania. Sean, welcome and thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm excited for this conversation because we are talking about a couple of very important things, and that's going to be on men's mental health and autonomy. And um, a little fun fact for sorry, I'll edit this part out. A fun fact is one of our pillars at Street Smart Ventures is autonomy. And autonomy to me is defined as making informed choices free from coercion and that align with your own personal values and truly just what feels right and what you want to do for yourself. So, Sean, you are the perfect person to have this conversation with.
Thank you so very much, Michael.
So, we can start this a million different ways, Sean. But I first want to ask you, um, what does autonomy mean to you personally, and has that definition of autonomy changed for you over time?
I would think the definition of autonomy for me much aligns with your definition, like almost verbatim. Free from social stigmas, free from any judgment.
And is there a moment that you feel okay sharing, Sean, that you felt like your autonomy was not respected, and how did it inform, you as an advocate, like people who know you, like I met you through Yeti, Youth Engagement Transition Initiative, our national network of young people and allies with disabilities to really inform systems change. So since I've gotten to know you over the years, Sean, I would just love to draw from your lived experience and your own wisdom on, um, what moments in your life have driven you in your advocacy efforts.
Well, for me, as a disabled man with CP, with my level of severity, autonomy has never been in the picture. Whereas people usually take the level of certain autonomy for a given, for me, it was earned and it was hard earned. And when it's earned, you get a new sense of what that autonomy is actually worth. And you actually realize how vital it is to operating as a just basic human being.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Um, what misconceptions about disability autonomy do you encounter the most often in your life?
So the classic misconception, right? Oh, they're disabled. They can't make decisions for themselves. They can't function. But look at me. I managed to make a move to Pennsylvania. I managed to get set up with services. I managed to do everything anybody else in this position would have done with their own autonomy had given the chance. So I would say that the most common barrier that most people face is stigma from others.
And I know can be an uncomfortable conversation, but I think it's one worth having, Sean. What would that look like specifically, or what has happened in terms of the stigma you've experienced?
For me, in terms of autonomy, it first started in academics. I was unlucky enough to be just born in the generation where autonomy for disability wasn't quite a thing yet.
Mm-hmm.
The most common outcomes for people like me were to be put in special ed solely based on our disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
not our abilities. And it wasn't until I proved that autonomy, till I could actually prove that I could academically keep up with my peers, that I was given the first glimpse of the autonomy that I so craved and that other people crave.
Hmm. It's you've heard of the phrase, Sean. innocent until proven guilty. And I think, your experiences have shown in the disability world and community, often it can be we feel like we're guilty until we have to prove ourselves innocent, and innocent being capable. What are your thoughts on
E- Exactly. I could not describe it any better, Michael. I
that?
really love that definition.
Mm. So, what is your typical response when you deal with discrimination and stigma from in your daily life? What is that like? I'm just curious. Like, what do you? Because I actually had a very long and powerful conversation this morning with Hunter about difficult conversations. I'm actually really curious, Sean. How do you handle that in terms of defending your own autonomy?
So not only do I explain that I am capable, but I also prove that I'm capable to this person, kind of like in not in a revengeful way, but in an informing way.
Hmm.
Sure, I can't run a 10-mile sprint. You can. But can you explain to me the myelination processes of axons and the difference between positive and negative charges when it relates to potassium and sodium and in what phases they occur? No? Okay then. Don't judge a book by its cover. The trick for me has always been we all have our strengths and weaknesses, but when a person has a disability, people seem to forget that lesson.
Hmm. There's a I think it's from a book, but you ever heard the phrase, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree? Have you ever
Yes.
heard of that, Sean? Yeah. So again, that brings that to mind. Now I got to ask you, and I don't know if you've been asked this before, how do you deal with the fatigue of constantly having to defend your autonomy? What is that like for you?
Honestly, this is where it gets idealistic on my part, but for me, it's a matter of hope. I
Hmm.
have to hope and I have to believe that what I'm doing as a member of Yeti, with you and everybody else, as a part of my job, is making a difference for the generations that come after me so that they will not have to fight as hard. Now, granted, the curse is we'll never see the end result of our work, right? But
Hmm.
that's not the point. The point is steady incremental increases in process to make everything easier.
Hmm. And that's really powerful, and that's a very generous way to view things, Sean. Is because you're right. you know, I've talked about this on many other recordings and presentations, but we as humans, we don't know the impact our words, our actions, our choices can have, not only on ourselves, but those in our close circle and worldwide. So I appreciate you're taking a very high level, big picture view of your advocacy efforts, and that's kind of a cool way to view it. So you talked about hope and kind of the perseverance that gets you through. I'm curious, Sean. Was there a moment, or what patterns have come up where you've been in spaces where your autonomy was respected and you felt included and belonged? What do you think made those spaces and conversations different?
Honestly, this is kind of weird to explain, but when you've been in an environment that doesn't respect you for so long, the second you are put into an environment that does, you almost feel a pressure shift. Like you can't put your finger on it, but you can just feel that respect in the air,
Mm-hmm.
even without someone saying a word.
Mm-hmm. I totally relate. And would you call, because I would call that my own intuition, right? And I feel like as someone with a disability as well, I can pretty much tell when someone's lying to me or putting on airs or faking things. So I appreciate you said that there really is this unspoken, whether you want to call it a feeling or a vibe or energy, there's this the presence in the room. Does that if that makes sense?
Yes, precisely.
So when you've been in spaces and you felt that, what what decisions and what actions do you think made those spaces positive and different?
I mean, just the fact that everybody was non judgmental, they all realized we're here for a common goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And even though there are variances in ability, they're all variances in positive ability. Hunter might be good at public speaking, but I have a head for numbers and seeing holes where the majority of people have never been able to see holes in conversations and in plot threads.
Mm-hmm. Because in some ways, Sean, and I think you and I are kind of alike in some ways, where even though I can be loud and joke around at times, I actually am a naturally quiet, like somewhat shy person who is very thoughtful and likes to think things through. So that's where I think I really admire and see some similarities. Where you're right, I feel like it's. I just think it's a human nature society thing, right, Sean? Where people immediately when they meet someone, they want to put them in a box and say, oh, okay, because you either look this way, you act this way. But it sounds like those spaces where you felt like you were heard, seen, valued, respected, your decisions were valued, it's because people saw you for your whole self.
Correct. And for anybody going through that situation, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna feel almost alien at first. But then you're gonna sink right into it and it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna fit. And you can realize that you could accomplish so much more than you ever thought of.
Hmm. So I'm kind of curious, Sean. At Street Smart Ventures here, we're all about designing programs, really helping individuals move forward, helping agencies move forward. I mean, we're in a growth phase where we want to just keep making positive impacts. And so much of our work is involving people and community building and how we can partner together to create positive change. And I'm curious, Sean, um, what thoughts do you have on what can society do to build more autonomy and make respect autonomy for people on a larger scale?
Honestly, the key is complete transparency. The number one issue when these types of things occur and people try and make change is that when the change actually happens, people don't believe it because there have been so many times where things haven't happened or the exact opposite has been done. So when good actually does come around, people don't believe it. And if
Mm,
people don't believe it, no further action will be taken because it doesn't have public support. And if it doesn't have public support, the movement dies. So the biggest key takeaway is transparency. The more transparent you can be when it comes to everything, the more the public can see and for themselves and not be taken in by anyone else's opinion and form their own conclusions, hopefully for the better.
hmm
But that can't happen if they're not given a peek behind the curtain because we've had years and years of programming of this is the way things are done. It's going to take a really long time to break that mold, even with people actively trying to make change like we do.
hmm no, thank you for sharing that, Sean. Is there a moment where you were in a space that, or with someone that was really transparent? Is there like a moment that you have a clear memory of oh, wow, this went really well?
Honestly, I had the same reservations about Yeti. The moment that it clicked for me was the first CBI. I actually saw the work that Yeti and various states were accomplishing on the back end. Whereas prior to that, I was only seeing the front end of everything. It was at that moment where I actually saw that Yeti's work and my other work outside of Getty was having impact, that I actually saw the full cycle. And that is the second that it clicked for me.
Mm. That's really powerful, and I think it kind of goes back to the cycle of right of your worldview is, maintaining that hope that things will be better, things can change, and balancing it with what sounds like having that realistic expectation of yes, not everyone will be understanding, not everyone will be um, see things the way I see it. So it sounds like you have a just have that really solid understanding of balancing hope and idealism with reality, if that makes sense.
Yes.
If there could be like any policies or structures that you'd change, like if you had like the magic wand, Sean, to build more autonomy and respect and giving people freedom to make positive changes in their lives, what would you do?
That is honestly a very good question. And honestly, I'm not sure that a policy change is what's required for that to occur. I believe that all of the policy that we need to make those changes is in place theoretically.
Hmm.
In my mind, it is a massive social change that needs to occur that is influencing policy. The
Mm.
reason people can't find PCAs, the reason people can't get the resources they need, or why people struggle finding mental health services is because of stigma and because of how hard it is to get through to the operator on the other end of the phone. I don't think it's a systems issue. I
Mm.
think it's a social issue masking as a systems issue.
Mm.
Because if it was a systems issue, I don't I don't think it would be that hard to fix. Things start at at a social level. To take the take all the civil rights movements throughout history, right? Laws can be changed on the books all you want, but what matters on the ground is
Hmm.
people's perceptions and social interactions.
Mm. Hmm.
So I think the whole problem is reversed.
That's no, thank you for sharing that. And I think, what do you think? What do you think gets in the way of um, socially with just getting with this the common discrimination and stigma that we experience as a society? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a cyclical process, right? The people that are outside of this circle look at the services and systems that are in place by state and by government and by smaller programs
Hmm.
and say, oh look, those programs are covering issues. There's no need for us to be concerned about it because those programs already exist. Where the programs are looking at the social opinions of the populace, seeing that reflected back at them, and as a result, no change gets made. I think it comes from the simple fact that people just need to realize that those systems are the result of their social actions, and their social actions or inactions, to be more precise, and opinions need to change for the system to change.
Mm. Um, you're kind of making me think of something. I was just tweaking my own bio, and like I was like looking over past presentations I've done, and I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but I think because I'm going to follow up with two questions to you. But before I ask you those, Sean, is at times in my life I felt like the people who made the biggest positive difference in my life saw me with potential, whereas a lot of society saw me as a problem. So it's going from problem to potential. What are your thoughts on that?
So for me, it was kind of a mix of the two, right? Coming from my academic background, I had to prove that I had potential by being a problem. You know, the common phrase is the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Well, let's just say I was a perpetually squeaky wheel, and no matter how much you greased me, I never stopped talking. Eventually, some of my worst enemies throughout my whole academic and social life became my best friends because I
mm,
would never stop advocating for myself. You, I will put it this way: when your worst enemies eventually become your best friends, that's when you know. That's when that transition occurs. That
mm,
you
mm,
go from a problem, a thorn, to respect.
mm. Um, wow, that's now. Can you describe when did you know that shift happens? Could you elaborate a little more on that, Sean? When you were seen as with potential and respect versus a problem?
Honestly, it was on the transition grid going from middle school to no, actually, it was going from high school to college every year, without fail, at every IEP meeting. They made the sarcastic same phrase to me: "Next year's gonna be harder. Next year's gonna be harder." Meanwhile, I was carrying a 4.0 GPA and I was on the honor roll, as well as the dean's list.
Mm,
Second, I graduated from high school into college. Guess guess in which meeting I did not hear that common phrase anymore.
I don't know. You have to tell me, Sean.
It was in that very last IEP meeting. Everybody realized they couldn't say that phrase anymore
Mm,
because I had beaten them at every single
mm,
challenge.
mm. I mean, you bring up a great point about expectations. Like you said, you know, this being partially a social problem is how it blends in with discrimination and maybe bias, whether consciously or unconsciously. But sounds like you directly have a lot of experiences with um, society, systems, and people that just spoke words over you that, oh, it's going to be hard, it's going to be hard every year. Where like how different would it have been is, Sean, like, what are your thoughts about this upcoming year? Like, or what excites you? What is what would you want to be different? Like, did anyone ever have those conversations with you that were really curious? Because it sounds like you had a lot of like fear based conversations and experiences versus curiosity.
So for me, those conversations never actually materialized and ended up happening. During that one of my very first IEP meetings, both because of my physical disability and their preconceptions at the time, I got pegged into a hole of psychology and mental health because those fields weren't really demanding based on the requirements of my disability, right? Which is fine. I love psychology. I've devoted my life to it. I love it. But the fact is, what if I didn't?
Mm, mm,
What if I wanted to go and do a different career choice? Could I have? I'll never know because people judge my ability based off my physical ability and nothing else. And by the time I got done proving that I had other abilities beyond just my physical form, it was honestly too late to have the, well, what do you want to do as a career conversation?
Mm.
So I just stuck with psychology.
Um, I just want to say, I'm sorry you had those experiences. In my own way, I can relate because, you know, I'm a brain injury survivor at 4 years old, and a lot of my mental health challenges really came at the onset of 13, 14. So you think, really from my early childhood felt like I was in constant appointments um, and just school, and just life was a challenge, I think, for me medically, and then going through school. But then middle school and high school really was when my mental health really became critical, and it was a real challenge to even just be there in day to day, in the day to day system, and just even have enough energy and focus to learn. Um, and I think I can hear you share parts of your own story, Sean. There were many moments where, um, people couldn't see beyond how I was then. Like when I was struggling and really needing support, there were very few people that could honor my need for, yes, I may need help in XYZ and get that support, but very few people gave me that support, but also that freedom and that curiosity to say, okay, Michael, we're going to help you with this if you want that, but let's also help you look forward and what do you want to do with your life. There was very it, my like you, it sounds like it was very black and white, and there wasn't a lot of gray area to, I think, what I call also life design. Just having an additional autonomy. I want to create the life that I want, not the life that you think I can handle or think I'm equipped to do.
Exactly. And just based on our age ranges and for I'm thinking that we both have the exact same roles. Just a generation later is when this
Mhm.
all started falling away.
Yeah, so this our conversation's really highlighting the importance of having these decisions, because my biggest hope for this recording, Sean, is this will be on our website. It's going to be used for educational content that'll really help influence and guide professionals who are working with young adults. And as we grow out our programming, it's going to be shown where young adults and those young adults who are in transition age, that they can hear our stories, hear your story, and take away gems from that. Um,
It's
I'm wondering, Sean, do you want to talk about men's mental health now, or is there anything else in your mind with autonomy you're dying to share?
if you take away one thing from this conversation, it would be that you are the key to change. You are the key to change. Things aren't just going to change on their own. You have to cast the stone into the river to see a ripple effect. And that in turn will influence your point of view. And it will create a positive cyclical effect instead of a negative one. And hopefully, after the next few years, videos like this won't be necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That ripple effect, that's really powerful, Sean. Um, are you okay to talk about men's mental health now? Because you talked about your love of psychology. What has that been like for you to learn more about psychology? Has that changed how you approach conversations? How has it changed how you deal with people? And I'm just curious about that, Sean.
So it's really interesting, right? The psychological world is billed as having all of these tricks to get inside the human mind. The common phrase is that we read people in our interactions with them. Only only about 10% of the time is that actually true. The majority of the time, we give our clients skills to figure out the solution for themselves. We don't do anything. We just guide them to the solution, whatever that may be for them. And we facilitate an environment so that they are able to do that in a positive way without judgment.
And I know we talked a lot about that in our conversation so far, Sean, but was there anything surprising you learned about ways to make those environments positive to facilitate that personal growth and positive change?
Honestly, the best way that I've found is just while keeping up a level of professionalism, keep it low stress, low stakes, and listen to what the person has to say and actively listen. The majority of problems in men's mental health come from the fact that it does not get addressed in the general populace because it's overtaken not only with stigma of men don't have mental health issues and men don't cry, but it's also overtaken in younger years when over diagnoses of autism occur because that could be masking as something else. Now, in cases where it actually is autism, that's beneficial. But there is an overdiagnosis of autism when it's actually a different issue entirely. And because people don't want to deal with the issue, there's just a blanket level of, oh, he's hyperactive. Oh, he must have ADHD or autism, and that covers up more serious or different issues.
Hmm.
And even when men figure that out, there's the whole stigma of, well, men don't get mental health, which is which is again back to that social model, right? That is solely perpetuated by that social stigma and belief, which feeds back into the system. But but I'm telling you, that is not true. Men do have problems. Men do have serious issues that need to be resolved, and these are worth addressing.
Hmm. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about men's mental health? You talked for a second on that, but I'd love to hear more.
Honestly, the biggest problems come from you know tough men don't cry. Men don't get help. Men don't need help. You can get through this on your own, and it's perpetuated through societal norms that men are the providers and they have to be the strong ones. That's not true. It's a collective. We all contribute to the cause we're trying to achieve. It's not so blanketly one sided. And you can't fit a gender norm onto a person like that and expect no negative reaction.
Hmm.
It's insane.
What do you think? What as we're talking about? Because clearly, you're absolutely right. There's an absolute need for men's mental health, and what do you think? What would you say to a man who was struggling and wanting support, but didn't feel like there was something out there for them? What would you say to that man?
I would say that regardless of what you're going through, regardless how isolating it feels, there are always resources. Any good trained psychologist will be able to see that. And they're not predisposed to these norms. That's one key aspect of training, is that there is always help, there is always something. And the key is to surround yourself with people that do agree, that will provide you the help you need. And if you're only surrounded by people that don't or won't or can accept it, then don't let it in. Those
Mm.
people are not worth being around, and it is not a reflection on you or what you're worth just because you are struggling with something. There is help out there. Find a good psychologist and get help.
And I'm curious, Sean, what are your thoughts on non-clinical support, and do you feel like we can really bridge clinical and non-clinical help?
So it's a really strong blend, right? If you can combine clinical support and non-clinical support with that supportive environment, it's a mix because that is the best result you can hope for. That is clearly the best result. And it often is the best path someone can be on. Now, for somebody who doesn't have access to both sides of the coin, be it a good psychologist or mental health professional or a good support system, um, the psychologist can recommend ways to find a good support system.
Hmm. And do you have what are your thoughts on peer support specialists and just the peer support community?
The peer support community can be very, very powerful, especially working in tandem. The one thing I would say though is when you're going in prior to knowing, guard yourself against opinion until you're sure they're 100% supportive.
So do you just to make sure I understand? So I know obviously peer support is drawing on lived experience to really provide that validation and support in um, in providing that effective support. So are you saying that um, just to not always treat someone else's experiences as a fact and something to talk over with over your own life?
Yes, it's all about that communal sharing, right?
Mhm.
There are some groups we agree with, some we don't. And in the right cases, it can be very, very powerful for the person. And in other cases, it can be very, very, very damaging.
Mm.
Like to the point where psychology almost has a negligible effect because for all the good that the psychological practice is doing, if you're in an environment that's hostile to it, then it's not doing much good.
Mm. I think you bring up an interesting point, Sean, because I'm a firm believer in peer support. I'm a trained peer support specialist in Connecticut. And I have colleagues, and I'm of my own belief that I'm all about all pathways to recovery. Like, I'm someone that has benefited from peer support. I know many I work with, and my colleagues obviously are, always promoting peer support. But I think many of my own colleagues, we see peer support as one pathway, and if someone can get benefit from genuine, effective peer support, that's incredible. We also are definitely all about warm handoffs. And if someone does need that clinical support to also live their best life, that's perfectly fine. I will say, I'm not going to name names, but there are some people I have come across that are very much non clinical only who have had, and this is me trying to be as empathetic as possible, some very, very traumatic clinical experiences. And although I can understand that from their point, um, I almost, as a peer support specialist, have been curious about. I'm not taking away their own autonomy to not have clinical support, but I've come across peer support specialists that literally only see peer support as never crossing paths with the clinical world. What are your thoughts on that, Sean?
So here's my thoughts on that. Now, I'm not gonna name names either, but I have seen some completely horrible psychologists that I don't even know how they got certified or how they got their license. When I've totally deconstructed their arguments, there is no psychological basis behind it. It was all, again, personal belief and social stigma and their own personal opinion. Now, I'm not saying that can't enter into it, but the overall job of a clinician, of somebody who is trained in this, is to be professional. And what I'm seeing of my generation that's coming up in the psychological field, we're trying to get rid of that old fashioned belief that and separate the social from the professional. And I'd like to think for the majority we do a good job, but there are bad psychologists out there, just as there are bad social models. I think the key, like earlier, both can work in tandem, but both have to work in the same direction in tandem for
Hmm.
it to be
Hmm.
effective. You need a good psychologist and a good peer support.
Hmm.
One can't work well without the other. And just because you had a bad experience with one does not mean that the other is superior.
Hmm. I kind of want to go a little off on the side in terms of men's mental health and just young men in general, right, Sean? I was talking to some leadership in the state here, and they were sharing some data with me that young men, transition age young men, and a lot of measures of we're behind young women, like in terms of employment, housing, education. And we were having a conversation on like just talking about there were differences in just outcomes between men and women. What are your thoughts on that when you hear that, Sean?
I would say that makes complete and total sense because at the same time, there's this dichotomy about being the providers, right? And supporting. But at the same time, there's also this parallel existing belief of you're never gonna be anything. Oh, men mature slower than girls, which yes, technically, physically that's true terms of in terms of actual physical matter development, but not in terms of maturity and not in terms of things we can accomplish on a case by case basis. Men and women can accomplish the same things with the same means if believed in. The only reason those numbers are reflected in that way is because we don't believe that they can. And consequently, that belief gets reflected onto them. So they don't believe it, they don't bother trying to achieve it. They think, what's the point? The system's getting in my way, society's getting in my way. Why bother? I'm just gonna give up and just take every moment as it comes and do what I want to do. And they're not gonna bother trying, and they're not gonna bother attempting to better themselves, even though they want to, because they believe society doesn't believe in them. Society's already shut the door, and they've already been brainwashed by societal expectations and the system.
Hmm. That's really powerful, Sean. So, if you giving you back the microphone, so to speak, addressing all the young men who may be listening to this recording, Sean, what would you want to say to them right now?
I would say that whatever you're trying to achieve in whatever field and whatever you're trying to do, don't give up. Keep trying. I know it sounds cliche, but that really is the key. If you keep attempting, you will come across the solution. If you give up, that solution's never going to come. But if you keep trying, there's a chance that it just might, and it will.
And similar question, but a little different, Sean. What do you want to say to any professionals, providers who work with young men? What would you want to say to them?
I would say treat them as individuals. Don't treat them as a number, which I know is hard to do because of big caseloads and, like we've been talking about, the stereotypes, right?
Hmm.
I would say that 30% is book and knowledge based, 70% is your own experience based. Don't be a slave to a textbook. You can interpret that textbook's knowledge in your own way to better assist your client. Don't make them feel like a number.
Wise words,
Make them
Sean.
feel like a
And
person.
I'm acknowledging we've been talking for about 45 minutes now. I think we've covered everything with autonomy, disability, society, discrimination, expectations, mental health, systems change. Um, During our last few minutes together, Sean, is there anything else on your heart and mind you want to share with our listeners?
I think I've got everything off my plate.
Well, that certainly is a very full plate. Sean, I just want to again thank you for sharing all of your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge. I know I learned so much chatting with you today. And again, I know our listeners and our viewers will learn so much. I think we've covered a wealth of information in just a little under an hour. So, again, I just want to thank you. I think the world of you, Sean. And so I just thank you so much for coming on here and just sharing what you're all about.
Thanks, and for
All right. On that note, everyone, until next time, bye for now.